Welcome to Icons Talk with Clarence R. Wallace, your forum for positive and uplifting conversations. It's a delight to have Shanique Victoria Edwards back with us to talk on this topic where we're talking about mental health. Now, the title for this is Breaking the Silence, Men of Color and Mental Health with Shanique V. Edwards. You go for it, Shanique. You tell them about yourself because I know some of them may not have met you before.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm Shanique Victoria. I'm a psychotherapist in private practice. I also work as a knowledge translation specialist at the CAMH, which is the Center for Addiction and Mental Health. I'm a mental health consultant with Black Mental Health Canada, and I serve as Director of Mental Health Strategy and Outreach with the Canadian Black Nurses Alliance.
Awesome. Welcome back. So we're going to get right into this. So my first question to you is this: how do societal pressures contribute to the mental health challenges faced by men of color, based on your expertise in neuroscience and psychology?
I think there's many points of intersection here. When we think about specifically Black men, I'll preface it by this is where I'm going to target my response.
Yes.
But when we specifically think about Black men within our community, there are a lot of nuances of what it means, the definition of what it means to be a man, what it means to be a Black man, what it means to be a provider or a husband, and how you are to show up in society that may not always see you in the most positive light.
Yes.
For many Black men, for them, just their utter presence may be intimidating to other people. And for that reason, there is almost this idea that you cannot be your full self. And for others, it may be that the messaging that they received has been one where men do this, they don't do that. And as a result, it almost closes off a part of who they are as a person. If you heard, for example, men don't cry, that might just be an example, or men are strong.
Yes.
Then what does that really mean? What does that look like? And perhaps maybe if you don't feel like you show up that way, maybe I don't always feel like showing up strong, but I'm told that men are supposed to be strong. Maybe I want to cry today, but I'm told men don't cry. We end up just swallowing those emotions, swallowing those feelings. We don't process them. And sometimes they can turn into some negative forms as we look to cope with them, whether that's anger, frustration, maybe even infidelity, things like that, how they show up and they present, simply because we have not really dealt with some of the nuances around the messaging.
You're so right. So they're not dealing with the core, the root cause of a problem. They're actually dealing with the symptoms of the problem. And you're absolutely correct about that. That happens a lot where things are not dealt with because people don't understand what's really truly happening within, especially amongst men of color. I mean, let's look at the history of what's happened to men of color. If you go back to history, they were embarrassed by their slave masters. Their wives were raped in front of them. They were abused. I mean, some people don't want to hear these things. But imagine the trauma that you experience. And it's done differently in our time. Because what happens now, you realize that so many men, especially men of color, are not there for their children. Why? Because many times it's a result of what happens in the system. They don't get the raises they deserve. They don't get the position they deserve, right? Because of the fact of who they are. And that in itself contributes to this problem that we're having.
Absolutely.
Because we're not seen as the same, right? People treat us differently based upon. So you're absolutely correct. And many times people say, well, why are you bringing up this issue about men of color? Because men are traumatized and they don't know how to respond because they don't have the knowledge or the foundation to actually deal with these topics.
Absolutely.
You know? So thanks for sharing that. So in your clinical counseling experience, what are some common signs of distress that men, particularly men of color, may exhibit when struggling with mental health issues?
I have to say that within my clinical practice, it's sad to say that we don't get a lot of Black men looking to get therapy, which I think is one of the first issues or the first hurdles that we face, is this idea of what therapy means or what it means to say I'm going to address and work on my issues. This is why I always celebrate when I have a Black man in my practice who's willing to do therapy, because I recognize how much courage that takes, how you're going against the grain, how you're going against what societal or community norms may be when it comes to addressing your mental wellness. But from the men that I do see and the ones that I do have, oftentimes it's that hard exterior shell. I'm only here because of, maybe if it's a couple, for example, because of something's going on with my wife, or I'm here because I'm feeling a little bit sad. And so for many, it's an inability to access certain elements of just their emotional self. And how does that show up? How does that present? And that may be due to some of their own childhood experiences. Maybe, for many, for example, I can only speak from my culture, but for many Black West Indian men, they're raised by single parent mothers. And for that reason, they struggle with, okay, well, this is how they showed me that a man is supposed to be. And so I cannot share my feelings, or I cannot share my emotions. And there's a discomfort there. I would also say that sometimes the way that it presents is, especially for people of color, is the opposite that we often talk about in mass media. It's not the laying in your bed, can't get out for days, not bathing, not showering kind of example. Because we don't have the luxury of doing that. We have to get up, we got to go to work, we got things to do. As well as some of the cultural nuances of what it means to, or what productivity means in our culture as well. And the idea of even taking some rest, how that may elicit feelings of guilt or thoughts of being lazy, for example. However, I think we do need to pay attention to, for example, the smiling depression, where you smile and everything is okay, but everything is not okay. We have to pay attention to our coping strategies as well. How are we coping? Are we looking at maybe maladaptive things to cope, whether that be drugs or alcohol, or not able to stay committed in a relationship, for example, or overworking and not showing up for your family, not resting. This is a huge thing in our culture, is that we do not give ourselves enough permission to just stop and rest and pause. And a lot of people, a lot of men especially, it's that guilt. I have to provide, I have to go to work. What it would look like if I lay down and I was just, in bed all day. That can't happen. So I would say that when we're looking at, okay, what are the signs and symptoms, thinking outside of the box. How has your personality changed? How has your outlook on life has changed? Are you still going after those things that you're actually passionate about? Or now have you shut down and you're more to yourself and you don't want to do the things that you used to do, the things that you used to find pleasure in before?
It's so interesting what you said. I really, as you were talking, I think about it. It's such a complex topic because regardless of race, we all function differently.
Yes, absolutely.
Like fingerprints, right? So one modality, as you say, won't work for another, even within the Black community.
Yes.
But the problem is that there's such a stigma attached to mental health throughout all communities. Imagine the Black community.
Yeah.
Where people are ashamed to say, I have a family member that has a mental illness. And there are different spectrum of mental health illnesses,
Yes.
And many people are mentally ill and they're functioning. They're functioning mentally
High functioning,
ill. They're wounded.
High functioning.
They're wounded, but they're functioning. And you mentioned a couple of things that I find important. I say this to Jake. A lot of people, they have on their status busy. They think it's like a badge of honor, right? But is busyness productivity? Busyness does not equate to productivity. I'd much rather be productive than busy. I have time and I have downtime. And the time I'm up, I'm at my optimum. I mean, I have been actually running on a little less sleep than normal over the last little while because of all the things that we're doing together, and Jake as well. And I told him the other day, a few Fridays ago, I said, listen, man, we shut this baby down. I had assignments to do, things to send to the publisher. I said, we're shutting this puppy down.
Absolutely.
And we're taking a break.
Absolutely.
I don't know, man. I'm telling you, everyone is different. But this is one thing I'm thankful for, that I'm in touch with people say female side. I have no problem with emotions. I've been blessed maybe because I was born with a woman inside of because I'm a twin. My sister came first. So I'm always amongst women. So maybe I picked up a woman's vibration. But I'm serious though. I'm telling you, the things that I've been through in life, and as a Black man, I really come through it. I'm telling you, guys, I think I have to share some of these experiences because so many people, I'm sharing it because I really want to help people to realize that don't let anyone, I've always said this, let your haters refine you. Never let them define you. Because unfortunately, there are people that are just targets for that. We don't want to keep it there, but I had to say that. I don't know why. I just had to say that. Hopefully someone gets something from that. Don't let them break you. All right, so in your clinical counseling experience. What are some common signs of distress that men, particularly men of color, may exhibit when struggling with mental health issues?
Signs of distress, again, I think varies, unique to each man, but it can take one end of the spectrum to the other. Ultimately, you want to be balanced.
Yes.
You want to be able to go through the trials and the tribulations that life brings,
Yes.
but be able to, and I hate to use this word really because it's not very indicative of exactly how it goes, but essentially bounce back.
Yes.
And if you're finding that, perhaps that individual is they go from 0 to 100, for example. That might be an example of that. Or again, how are they coping? What strategies are they using? Not sleeping, maybe excessive video games for younger men or younger males, for example. Maybe overworking, not knowing when to pause, not willing to take that vacation, not willing to call in sick when maybe that's what you really should be doing. Short-tempered sometimes shows up. Emotional shutdown, not being willing to engage or speak about one's emotions or what's going on in one's mind, how are they feeling? And some of that equates to perhaps not really having the language, but I think some of it also equates to not necessarily having the safe spaces to do that.
That's true.
Many young people, unfortunately, are turning to substances as a way of coping and dealing with some of the issues that they are having. And I would also say, other indications may be some of the physical ailments. And that is something that's really imperative when we think about mental health symptoms in our community, is that for many of us, it doesn't just show up as the sadness or the anxiety that may perpetuate. It may be some of the physical symptoms, the headache, the stomach pain, the high blood sugar when you never had blood sugar issues before, the high cholesterol when you never had high cholesterol problems before. Maybe there's changes in maybe how your body is relating, or maybe it's just brain fog, mental confusion, things like that. Those may be signs and symptoms that something else is going on. Absolutely go to your medical doctor to rule those things out. But after you get that clean bill and everything is coming about great, maybe it's then the next step is to look at, is this maybe my mental health? Yeah,
it's true. So many illnesses are psychosomatic, right? Because when you're under stress, your body releases cortisol, suppress the immune system. Now you're more susceptible to illnesses. And also when you're a lot of people, when they're stressed out, they don't eat well.
Yes.
Because they just not have that awareness. But thanks for sharing that. That's definitely some of the issues that a lot of people face. Can you elaborate on how unrealistic expectation placed on men can lead to a sense of brokenness of spirit, and as mentioned in the email?
Unrealistic expectations, I think, across the board have such an impact, even when we think about the idea of stigma. Because for some, having any form of mental distress is a form of weakness. And societally, men are the epitome of strength. And so now to have this idea that maybe I'm not as strong, maybe I won't show up as strong, and how that may, react to the way that my family, my friends, my spouse, my partner may now look at me, deters people from really attending to that. I think also some of these expectations of what it means to be a man, how do we define that? And I'm going to go back to that idea of strength as well, is that I know what's best for me. I can take care of me. And I like to use the example of, if you were having a heart attack, you would go to the hospital, right? So if something is going on with you mentally, you need to address that. Sometimes it's not simply enough to just, whether it is, if you are a spiritual religious person, just praying about it, or trying to solve it on your own. Sometimes we don't even know what we're trying to solve in the process as well. And so keeping yourself isolated, I would say is another one of those impediments that Black men face. But even more so, I think allowing yourself to have that room and that space. I think sometimes the demands that are placed on Black men in terms of excellence, in terms of trying to be an upstanding and a good member of society, and maybe not repeat past generational mistakes, not to say that they necessarily happen in your own family, but when we think about, for example, just mass incarceration of Black men, and maybe you're trying to not be that, and you're trying to be something different. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but sometimes it doesn't leave enough room for you to really hone in on, what am I passionate about?
Yeah.
Who am I?
Yeah.
What do I like? What don't I like? And so I say that sometimes those expectations rob men of the luxury. And I call it a luxury because to be able to sit and to think about and to reflect on maybe your journey and where you want to go, it is a luxury when you think about the fact that I got to go to work, I got to support my family, I got to hustle, I have to do all of these other things that society is telling me that I have to do because I'm a man. When you do have the luxury to do that, it could be a blessing. But when you don't have the luxury to do that and you don't get to tap into yourself, then the question comes to then, who are you really living for? And I think that becomes a bit of a conundrum that can be difficult.
Goes right back to what we said earlier about ignorance, right? What we said in the previous episode about ignorance, that you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, the Bible says that my people suffer because of lack of knowledge, right? They don't have the knowledge, so they don't know how to really solve the issues. Like you're giving someone a math problem without giving them the basic of how to actually do that, right? This is an equation. If they don't know how to do it, it doesn't mean anything to them. So even though we have some programs or solutions, if they don't know, they can't apply. Right?
Yeah. And where they're getting their information from. You know, a lot of young people, they're getting their information from mass media, right? Music, and not recognizing that not everybody is going to have the privilege of maybe having those token success stories. And for that reason, you do have to change a little bit of what the narrative looks like and how you're going to operate. But again, we follow after what our peers want. We follow after those types of stories and narratives that we think how life is supposed to be.
That's correct. Yeah. The thing is, you're right. You have more followers than leaders. That's the problem, right? I'm a guy from I was high. I mean, I'm not a tall guy, but I was a child. I remember I always question stuff. I always want to have evidence in it, and a lot of times people are afraid of doing that because they don't want to be, be seen as someone that's trying to challenge the system. But trust me, it needs to be challenged because we need to grow. Another thing is that you said, though, even if you don't have the funds to go to a psychologist or someone that does your type of practice, psychotherapy, if you have some good friends,
your tribe.
You have your friends. You have some few good friends that you can just speak nonsense to, and they just don't judge you. That alone, I'm telling you, that's therapy. That's my therapy.
Absolutely.
I asked Jay, I am a guy, I am not ashamed of telling people how I feel. They can judge me all they want. That's their problem. Because tell you what, I got to live my life. But I encourage you guys, if you can afford, if you have a few good friends that you can talk to, you can open up to, that is not going to take your business and go tell everybody else, tell you what, you're good. You're good. That's a big part I found. I mean, you're a professional, but I found just by speaking. It's interesting because I just recently went to a men's, and Jake went with us, and the topic was men don't talk. That's not me. I'm not a silent guy. I speak my heart, and I find it so therapeutic. I mean, I'm just telling you, that's from my experience. Yeah. That's such a beautiful. And women as well, just talk it out. Women tend to talk more than men. That's why I said men don't talk. And there are a few exceptions.
And it's interesting because Black Mental Health Canada has a program where they support barbers in how to recognize the signs and the symptoms of mental distress. So because the barbershop, men are going to the barbershop, and so that's where they're talking, right? So they have an initiative, and they have a couple of barbers that they have worked with and partnered with. But that's just an example of, how are we addressing this within the community in a way where the source is one that Black men will access, right? I can't have the expectation that all Black men are going to look me up and want to work with me. But if we can bring the services to people, because again, I think within our culture, because we don't talk about it so much and because it doesn't look like that cookie cutter diagnosis, oftentimes we don't recognize it until it's too late or it's too much of a problem. We cannot handle it now. And from that, there's a whole other conundrum of things that happen there. But if we can have areas and places where people can begin to recognize that, and it's just that sometimes, to be honest, it's just simply by saying, I noticed that you're a little off today. I noticed that something else might be going on. Do you want to talk about it? And then from there, how that conversation can flow. But we have to become comfortable within ourselves to have those conversations.
And people will be comfortable if they feel like they're not judged.
The safe spaces.
That's the problem.
Absolutely.
The problem
Safe
is when
spaces.
you start judging, oh, you shouldn't feel that way. Oh, you're a man.
Yeah.
Those are the things that kind of,
Safe spaces.
Yeah.
Important.
And another thing that sometimes people say to men, like if you get, well, they say it mainly to women, but also sometimes it's not acceptable, especially when a black man shouldn't get angry. But it's okay for a white man too. Mm-hmm. A black man, if he wears his baseball cap backwards, he's looked at differently from a white man who does the same.
Yes.
So you see the optics?
Yes.
And this is a challenge that men of color face because we're judged strictly on our appearances before even given an opportunity to express yourself.
And that's exhausting.
These are the things that it is.
That's exhausting to deal with
if
that
you don't
day
know
in
yourself
and day
as
out.
a man, and this is the reason why I'm saying I will partner with you. I really see the need of having workshops that can help our youth to really understand their worth. Because if we're going to depend on our system to do that, it's not going to happen. I'm telling you straight up. Yeah. They have other agendas, and that agenda doesn't include us. I'm just being honest with you guys. All right. So if you want our world to be better, start thinking about what we're doing. Give me a seat at the table because we have some solutions to make and we need some money to do that. Okay, so government people, you're listening, give us some money to do the work. All right.
But I would also arguably say too that even if you are a strong person and you have a strong sense of who you are, over time, when you think about that year after year after, when you just think about, just for example, the workplace, and every year you're being overlooked for that management position, maybe they put you in positions where you're training somebody of a different, of who has privilege and power, and they get the role over you, and you've been with the company 20, 30 years, that form of racism, over time, you could be as strong as you want. It will begin to erode.
Yeah. That's why I'm telling you, listeners, listen to me. I will never work for another person day of my life. I will only work for my clients. You understand? That's me. Either that or I don't exist. Because I have seen that I cannot depend on systems to make Clarence who Clarence is supposed to be. And unfortunately, we got to start building our own bridge and start walking on theirs. Because their bridge is not built for us. I'm just being honest. And some of you are building the bridges. Start building proper bridges so we can actually truly bridge that divide where we can work together as one. Black men, black women, I don't care who you are, people of all different races. As I said, we are in the garden of life. In the garden of life, there are many flowers, all of varying degrees of flowers, of colors, I should say. And the sad part is, you touched on it a bit, that even within the black community, the brown community, even within the white community, there is still some schisms that goes on. You don't have blue eyes, you got brown eyes, you got freckled skin, you got red hair. In the black community, oh, you're too dark, oh, you're too light, you're too, so it's just a messed up world. So we really all need to come to a place of recognizing that, you know what, just be you, man, just be authentic.
And understanding that these differences are societal constructs, right? Yes. It was society's way of determining who was greater than, who was lesser than. And so when you continuously play into that, we're playing into that same narrative. And so pulling yourself out of that is realizing that there's beauty in all difference.
Absolutely. Just like the garden, man. You got different colors and just make it more beautiful. But we're so... Anyways. Let me calm down. Love you all. Love you all. Love you all. Don't worry. Don't send no hate messages, please. We won't be reading them. Reflecting on the tragic loss mentioned in the email, how can... the loss of, I told you about a situation that happened. How can we better support men who may be silently battling their demons, especially in the aftermath of a breakup or other significant events? They may have lost their job, there's a breakup, someone significant in their life left them. How do they manage those things? What would you recommend?
I definitely would say, it starts by creating the structure or the ground from which you can kind of cultivate these relationships. People are not just going to come off the street and be like, hey, by the way, like, I'm not feeling great. That's based on relationship. And so if you within yourself, within your social groups and your tribe, as I like to call it, prioritize having these conversations about, okay, this is a place where we could talk about mental health. Yes. This person can come and talk about it and feel safe and without any judgment, as well as understanding the fact that, okay, this may be beyond just the group, and encouraging that person to go and get resources and support. And maybe that might take you going with them, right? If they don't feel comfortable going to that therapist. And I think when I think about it from a therapist perspective, being open to the fact that maybe it might mean having a session with a guy and his friend until he feels comfortable having the session on his own and being flexible that way. So it's parts of there's different parts to this, but I definitely think it first starts with having those relationships. And if you are in a place where, for example, you feel comfortable having these conversations, being that encourager, it's okay for us to talk about that. Hey, how are you doing? No, really, how are you doing? And not just selling for the superficial answers, but being willing to go a little bit deeper, willing to really kind of be that sounding board, but also be that place where if they need to be replanted, can you be that fertile soil for them where they can feel like they can really grow and come back to? And I think for many young men, they don't have authentic places like that. They may have friends, they may have guys that they call when they want to go play basketball or hang out. But one of the things I hear a lot of times is, I don't have that authentic relationship where I can go. I don't have that person in my life that I know that I can turn to and have this kind of conversation. And I think a part of that goes back to, again, some of our societal expectations on men, some of the language that we use when we think about masculinity and what it means to be a man. And so when we're talking about certain things, we also have to be cognizant of how are we talking in the presence of men? Because if we're talking colloquially and it's not in a safe manner, you can better believe they're not going to want to come and talk to you when they're going through something, because you already shown them how you will treat and how you will talk about. And so that really breaks down the conversation.
Well said. I won't even say another word to that. Considering the urgency of addressing these challenges, thank you so much. What proactive measures can individuals and communities take to foster a supportive environment for men of color facing mental health struggles?
I definitely think that we need to have a more targeted approach. I think the approach that we have right now for many Black men, their introduction to the mental health system is through the criminal justice system. So whether they're having a mental health crisis, the police end up being called. There's only two options. They either get taken to a hospital, which can be quite traumatic for some because they get formed and they have to stay in the hospital against their will. Perhaps at a time where they may be a little bit confused. Maybe that's their first interaction with mental health care. That's very traumatic. Or the other option is that they go to jail, which has its own trauma associated with it. I think as well as targeting from younger. It's important, again, to have in schools, to have within community programs where not only are we talking about leadership and we're talking about, choosing the right friends or utilizing your voice, but we're also talking about emotional regulation and we're talking about emotional processing and how to speak about how you're feeling and cultivating, again, that environment for that. I think sometimes, and I'm not negating, I have middle-aged men in my practice who come and I celebrate them because I don't ever think it's ever too late to start therapy, but how much fuller their lives could have been if maybe they knew that this was an option for them earlier on in their life, or they had, spaces and places where they had people that they trusted who could say, hey, if you're having a hard time, mind you, maybe you don't want to talk to me, but hey, here are some resources. How about you talk to them? And if you need help with that, if you need someone to go with you, I'm willing to do that for you. Or if you want to come back and talk to me afterwards, I'm here for you. And from a young age, having that support, I think is integral. And I think also, I would also add to that mentorship. Mentorship is so important. And we oftentimes think about mentorship in regards to professional development. We need to start thinking about mentorship in regards to personal development. And how could you potentially, within your various role as an elder, go out there and support another young man and mentor them and support them in the wide breadth of their life, crossing over the personal and the professional, so that they can know now, because knowledge is power, as we've mentioned before, that knowledge is power in the sense that once you know, okay, you might come upon this situation. These are things I found were helpful, but these were things I found that were not helpful. This is where I maybe made a mistake. And I think within our community, we don't talk about our mistakes quite as often, right? But it's mistakes are the things in which we can learn from. And that brings a sense of realness, because we're not going to connect with you if we don't feel you're authentic, if we don't feel like you're genuine, if we don't feel like you're real.
Man, you see, that what you said was just loaded. It's so true. Just having empathy,
Yeah.
that alone can make such a huge difference. It's just having a little empathy to listen to someone that could make a difference in their lives. It reminded me of someone I know that was actually talking. He was actually delivering a message, and he's talking about there was a person who had asked him, one of those guys on the street asking for money, and he decided to give the guy, instead he decided to not just give the guy money, but have a coffee with him. And he spoke with the guy. And the guy, that he saved the guy's life? Because the guy was actually planning on killing himself after. And just by having that conversation. So, we don't have to be experts. But we are humans and we need connection. And you can save a life just by your attitude.
And don't be afraid to have the conversation. I think sometimes we do think, for example, when we consider suicide, let's not talk about it because we think that might lead to.
No.
But you never, like you just said, that's an example of you just don't know how you can be the interrupter to another plan.
That's right.
And help save somebody's life. And for that reason, don't be afraid to just ask. Simply sometimes just asking, are you okay? And not in that way where you ask, are you okay? And you're walking by. But are you okay? And have a genuine concern and wait and pause and sometimes just letting people know, I am here if you need to talk.
That's it.
And so people can know, because I think especially sometimes there's this idea that I'm being a burden. And I don't want to be a burden. I don't want to, that person has a lot of their own problems. I don't want to add to their problems. But you don't know that capacity of what that person has. And you also don't know, maybe God has freed up that person to have capacity for you.
That's true.
So if that person presents themselves as a resource for you, then don't be afraid to use it.
I agree. As you were talking about that, it just really inspired me, because I'm actually now thinking, as soon as the dust settles a bit, wherever I end up being, because anyways, I won't get into that detail right now, but the thing is, it just birthed in me what you're saying, that I need to have a mentorship program. Whether it be after school, in school, whatever that looks like. But definitely that really came to my mind as you were uttering those things regarding.
But I will say this one caveat go ahead. In regards to, I love mentorship programs, but let's not forget, the young adult men. We do a lot of stuff for youth, for example, and we miss that age group sometimes, where, especially if we're looking at it in the healthcare system, that 18 to 25 age range, oftentimes there's a lapse in services, right? They may graduate out of the child services, and then there's nothing for them until. So when we think about, how do we really support our young men, we have to also be thinking about tailored things to that demographic, especially because I feel like they get missed oftentimes.
And you're so right. And even beyond that, because seniors people are living longer now, right? And believe me, age doesn't really make a big difference sometimes. There are people who grow up, but they get older, but they never mature. So there are even people that are in their 50s, 60s, and they still have that high school mentality. I've seen it. I've seen grown men act like they're in high school, like they're high school jocks. They still have their testosterone bouncing around their head with their egos. No, I'm serious though. I know I say it jokingly, but seriously, that's something that also needs to be addressed, because a lot of people really don't know really themselves in that manner. Anyway, let's move on. From your perspective, what role does awareness and education play in destigmatizing mental health issues within the men of color community? And I may add, if there's any initiative that's been taken that you're aware of that can actually be able to deal with that.
Yeah, I think. Well, I will say, however, that Black Mental Health Canada does a lot in regards to that education piece and bringing a sense of awareness to mental health issues, not just for Black women, but also Black men, and recognizing that there is a significant need for things that are tailored specifically for Black men, for men by men, I will say as well. I think awareness is a huge piece of it. Again, we don't talk about it enough in our community. And when you don't talk about it, it can run rampant. If we were to liken it to a physical ailment, if you don't talk about your family history and the different ailments that are in your family, then you present and you might be having headache, you may be having vomiting, you may be having all of these different symptoms, and you have no idea what's going on. And you're going to utilize the remedies that you learned of old. Not to say that those remedies or those coping strategies don't work, but there may be a bigger problem happening. And when we can talk about it and say, when you start to lose pleasure in the things that you have, when going to work now is a chore and you're dragging yourself out of bed, you're dragging yourself to spend time with your children. It's just you there's no hope. You've lost a sense of hope. That is a time for you to check in, to be like, okay, maybe I need to talk to somebody. Maybe my first step is to go to my doctor, and maybe from there, and it's not to say that, automatically you need to take medication. It's not about that. But oftentimes your doctor has resources. They have connections to therapists and other resources that you can have or utilize in order to support yourself. But you won't go to seek the doctor if you don't recognize that that's what's happening. Or when you go, again, it is too late. So having that awareness. And also, I think that awareness enables us who are in relationship with young men to be able to stop and pause and ask the questions, not just assuming, well, that's just how they are. Well, maybe something else might be happening here. And quite curious as to, I like to call it compassionately curious. We don't want to be in people's business, but being compassionately curious as to what's going on here. You're seem a bit different. How can I lessen the load for you? How can I support you? And then being open to hearing what they have to say. But all of this comes from our own growing, learning, knowledge about what mental health really looks like in our community. And I think one of the other things that I would say too is prioritizing these conversations in spaces where Black people frequent, whether those are faith-based organizations, whether those are cultural organizations. We do a lot of programmings for a lot of different things. We need to be having these conversations from places where Black people will trust the source. And I think that is an important thing to take into consideration when we think about how can we start to really support our community better. Yeah,
as well said. It is so true. You mentioned in the previous episode regarding the mental health first aid, I find that it's so important that we develop those skills, because even if there are people you trust, but the people you trust and you can talk to, if they don't have the knowledge and how to give you proper advice, there are people sometimes they love you, but not because they love you mean their advice is correct.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that's the reason why we know the initiative like what you're doing, I really endorse it, because you don't just want to have information, you want to have the correct information. Because if you don't have the correct information, that can mess you up too. So thanks for sharing that. Thank you so much. Okay. Things change again on me. Okay. Sorry about that. Next question for you. We're getting close. How can we empower our audience to intervene and provide meaningful support networks for men of color navigating mental health issues as discussed, as we mentioned?
I think it's doing your own learning, doing your own deep dive into, do I even know what signs and symptoms look like? Like I said, I do mental health first aid training. And for many people, they're so surprised by some of the nuances. I'm like, it's not going to be the person who doesn't show up at work. It's not going to be the person who is constantly calling in sick. It's going to be the person who is forever on the go and can never stop sometimes. It could be the person who internalizes everything and shuts down and doesn't talk. It could be the little quiet person who we always just chalk it up to the fact that they're quiet while their inside life is so loud and tormenting. So when we can become more comfortable with it, then we will go and talk about it. We won't talk about things we're not comfortable with or things that we ourselves shy away from. So when you're doing your own reading or your own learning, and there's great books out there, there's training workshops out there, and I'm not just talking about for professionals, right? They're for just lay people as well, in order to understand its intersection with yourself, and then therefore how is it intersecting with the world around you and your family and your community around you.
No, that is so what you said is so true in terms of because I have gone through different spectrum of mental health myself, and I'm not ashamed of that. Because when you deal with societal pressures and different things, and many people see me and think, you know, this guy is so outgoing. He likes talking to people. But I'm also a lone wolf. I enjoy time of solitude.
Yes.
And being alone to me is not lonely. You know, I'm serious about that. I do enjoy interacting, but also a part of mental health is to be by yourself. I'm not talking about, you know, just stay away from people but you need some time just to get away. And as you said, one of the things that I did when I was going through many of different levels of emotions, I listen to audiobooks. I'm an avid reader and I listen to audiobooks. And I've learned so much as it regarding to self-awareness, how to respond to others. You know, so you're right. Even if you don't have the funds to necessarily see a therapist, but there's so much resources available that can actually make a difference in terms of. So thanks for mentioning that. I don't know how could I miss that as a professional student, but you're a professional student
and
too.
if I can add to self-care is so important, and I know in popular media it's become so glamorized. You go to the spa, you do all these, you know, but to be honest, self-care is just the little things that you're doing to reconnect with yourself.
Absolutely.
So if it's the solitude, if it's the reading the books, and that could be so impactful because especially when we think about young men, if they can see you mirror doing that, they'll mirror that.
Absolutely.
Right? I saw so-and-so whom I respect. He has boundaries. After 5, it's his alone time or whatever that might look like, and being able to vocalize that and making that a priority so that even from younger ages, you're beginning to realize that I need to attend to me. I need to reconnect with me, because then you will know when you're out of sync with you.
That's why so many men commit suicide, because of lack of self-care. They care for everybody else, but not themselves. You know, listen to me, guys. Watch me. Listen to me. You see this face? I take care of it. I do my facial. I will go do my mani-pedi. I don't care what you say. Listen to me. It's one body I got, okay? So I don't take care of it. You don't take care of yours. That's your problem. But you're absolutely right. Self-care is not selfishness. There's so many people want you to care for them at the expense of yourself. Listen to me. It's not selfish. Take care of yourself. Because when you're sick, a lot of people won't be in the picture. Trust me, bro. Sisters, trust me as well. Take care of yourself. Self-care is important. Not just your nail and your hair. Take care of your heart. Especially your soul. You know, that's why we have nourishment for the soul. Hey, we got to talk about, don't forget, we got to talk about nourishment for the soul, because that book, anyhow. Let's move on. This is so nice. I'm enjoying this. Drawing from your expertise, what are some actionable steps individuals can take to recognize signs of distress and offer support to men of color in their lives? I know you mentioned a few things, but maybe we can recap that.
Yeah, I think one of the greatest things, I always like to tell people, reintroduce yourself to yourself.
Yeah.
Every phase of life is different. Who you were yesterday or a year ago may not be who you are today. So take some time to, who am I? What are my passions? What are my joys? And be okay with the change. But also recognizing that as you might be changing, growing, transforming, maybe it's not happening, you know, as quickly in the world around you. And making sure that you have those safe spaces, you have community, you have a tribe, and your coping strategies. I think that's one of the other greatest things too, is taking inventory of how are you coping? How do you manage stress? Are you doing effectively? And when I say effectively, is it bringing you a sense of peace? Is it bringing you a sense of balance? Does it add to more of the wellness jar as opposed to the deficit jar? And when you can take stock of these things, again, at that point in time, you'll be able to recognize I'm off, right? And we all have those indicators. We just need to tap into them. I know when I'm reaching my brink and I'm what I like to call, I'm done peopling. I'm hitting pause on that, right? And then being able to communicate those boundaries, I think is very important. Our culture is not known for boundaries, right? Growing up, there were no boundaries in a West Indian home. So we don't really learn how to assert the no. We don't know how to assert and say, I'm not okay with doing this, or I don't have capacity for this. And that's, in being able to develop some of that language can be so imperative as a resource to know, like, no, I'm at capacity. I have all of these other responsibilities that I have to do. I can't take on something else. And then also recognizing the fact that I have no reason to be guilty for that.
You know what Shanique said? If I was watching this, I would actually hit the rewind. Hey, you got to drop some fire emojis. I'm telling you, Shanique is spitting out fires. Drop some firebomb in it. I'm telling you. What you said is so profound. No, it's so true though. So many people are afraid of saying no. People pleasers. You know, I told someone, I recently said, listen, I am no more Mr. Nice Guy. I'm serious. Guys, no, I'm not saying to be a bad guy, but listen to me. No more Mr. Nice Guy. You know what? When I mean nice guy, I'm talking guys who apologize for things that they don't do. You know, go out of the way for people that don't even love you or are unkind to you. Just because. And you know the problem about Mr. Nice Guy? Let me talk to you, Mr. Nice Guy. The problem that happens, Mr. Nice Guy, they don't really think you're nice. They think you're foolish. They take your kindness for weakness and they think you need their approval. So stop being Mr. Nice Guy, you'll be okay. Use the word N-O. It's a very important thing, can save your life. Thanks for sharing that point. I'm serious about that. No more Mr. Nice Guy. All right, in your view, what are the key takeaways we should aim to provide our audience with during this discussion in terms of understanding and addressing mental health issues faced by men of color? What are some of the key takeaways? I mean, we said a lot, but what are some of the key points that you leave the audience with?
I would probably end by saying it's okay to not be okay.
Yeah.
And begin to really normalize this idea that I don't always have to be at 100.
Yeah.
I don't always have to be happy and go lucky. That if I'm having an off day, I'm having an off day. And creating that space in that room for somebody to work that out for themselves and not expect for everyone to always be on. I would also say that it's also okay to put down the mask sometimes. We as people of color, but especially as men, I would say, have to wear so many different masks as they show up in this world. And how important it is for you to cultivate spaces where you can put the mask down, where you can put up your feet, and where you can just be. That's a huge part of, again, understanding what is your equilibrium, what does your balance look like when you have those spaces. And the other thing that I would say is don't be afraid to reach out for help. And it doesn't always have to be this loud, elaborate thing as well. You know, just knowing that there are resources where you can access support anonymously. People reach out to me all the time as well to say like, I am struggling. What can I do? I can't talk to my family about it. And I think we are here to be able to help and support in that avenue. I always say I don't always have to be the end door, but I can oftentimes be the first door for you. If that just means, hey, where do I go? How can I help so-and-so? Do you know anything? And I've had people who do that all the time. And I know some of my colleagues are the same. You know, if we don't have the answers, we will certainly be able to guide you to the answer. And if we don't have capacity, we're not going to leave you on the doorstep. We're going to show you straight to the table.
Yes. You know, thank you for sharing that. You know, you said something and it came to mind. I never made a note of it. But I've been so blessed. I have a doctor, Dr. Lisa Beard, shout out to you. I'll tell you, she's the most humble person you'll ever meet. And she doesn't treat you like cookie cutter. This woman knows everything about me. She's been my psychotherapist. She sent me books to read. Like, I wish everyone had a doctor like her. I'm telling you. So Dr. Beard, thank you so much for your support. And I also want you, Shanique, please share with the audience how they can connect with you again. We'll also put that in our credits so they can connect with you. People may need workshops done. I know you're some stuff together.
I love to.
We're gonna collaborate.
Yes, for sure.
I'm sensing that there's some things that we can do to actually help some people out.
Love to.
All right, so we'll talk about that after the show. But again, just share with them where they can connect with you.
Sure.
Please.
My website is www.shaniquevictoria.com. I'm on Instagram at Shanique_Victoria. I'm also on LinkedIn as Shanique Victoria Edwards. And then email hello@shaniquevictoria.com. So pretty easy to find me, hopefully, if you need to.
Awesome. And my final thing, I got to talk about this. Nourishment for the soul. I hope you had some nourishment for the soul today. Because, you know, as we said, our purpose and our goal is this. It's a forum for positive and uplifting conversation. But the end goal is that we hope that we have brightened your day and empower your spirit. So Nourishment for the Soul is coming out very soon. As I said, you know, we'll put it out there. We're working on the website. Certain things are going to be in place pretty soon for you to make your order. Remember, if you order your before July 24th, you will get the limited edition sealed copy signed by me. Not printed, signed. It's a work of art. I'm just telling you that, okay? And you won't be disappointed. If you're disappointed, send it back to me, okay? Okay, send it back to me. It's hardcover, okay? But I know you won't be disappointed because it covers a lot of stuff. So please put in your order pretty soon, July 24th. The launch date of the book is August 24th. And as I said, I will not be signing any book and mail it out. But there will be book signings in different cities. If you're in those cities and I'm there and I sign the book, all the proceeds that you give that day will go to a mental health work. Possibly Shanique's in Canada. If we're somewhere else in the US, we'll probably do that. So thank you all so much for joining us today with this really challenging discussion. I hope that it took some of the stigma out of your mind. If you're challenging, if you're dealing with mental health, just understand. If you had a broken foot and you went to the hospital, they'll take care of you. Or if you have a broken foot and you're hopping towards the door, someone will help you. So sometimes we just need to get a better understanding that mental health is quite similar, and just that it's not seen doesn't mean it's not there. So please enlighten others with what we just said.